Greetings of the day to everyone. ClatFunda brings for you all another video on logical reasoning. In this video, we shall discuss fundamentals of logical reasoning, critical reasoning techniques, and various types of questions that may follow a passage which are most likely to be asked in CLAT 2020. Let us start with fundamentals of logical reasoning. Here, we shall understand certain concepts and terms which are frequently used in logical reasoning. First one is statement. It is nothing but an expression of something in words, spoken or written. Next is premise. It is a statement or an idea that forms the basis of a reasonable line of argument. Similarly, evidences are the facts, signs or objects that make you believe that something is true. So both premises and evidences are trying to lead towards a fact of which we are trying to believe to be true or false. So in logical reasoning, both of these terms, premises and evidences, are interchangeably used because they form the ground or reason for the flow of an argument and thus leading towards a conclusion. Next is inference. Inference is something that you can find out indirectly from what you already know. So it is necessarily based on the facts, information or data that is available at hand, which means on the basis of known information, what all you can infer from it, what all you can find out from the given information will be called inference. Next is conclusion. Conclusion is something that you decide when you have thought about all the information connected with the situation. So the decision drawn after the process of logical thinking is a conclusion. Now here, it is not necessary that the conclusion is drawn from the existing information. Though the existing information is used in the process of logical reasoning, yet there might be certain assumptions involved and thus we have reached a conclusion which may or may not be true. The very fine difference between inference and conclusion is this, that inference necessarily flows from the information available, whereas conclusion is the decision taken after the thought process which uses the information available. Next is argument. An argument is a reason or set of reasons that someone uses to show that something is true or correct. So argument includes both the reasons for something to be true and that conclusion of what is true and what is not, and till what extent something is being proved to be true. So as we have understood in previous video that an argument has both of these elements, the premise or evidence or the conclusion. At the same time, it is to be considered that an argument can have more than one premise and it can have more than one conclusion. So, premises will be certain major facts that are general ideas applicable to more than one situation, and then we'll have a minor premise or a minor fact which is applicable or true in a present scenario. Thereafter, there can be an intermediate conclusion which may also act as a premise in order to reach to a final conclusion. Next is critical thinking. It is a process of analyzing information in order to make a logical decision about the extent to which you believe something to be true or false. So critical thinking is the process wherein we critically examine whether the information given to us is true or not, and if at all we believe it to be true, till what extent is it true, or how much do we believe it to be true. This whole process of analysis of information given to us is critical thinking. Next is analogy. So it is a comparison of one thing with another thing that has similar features. So when we compare two similar things, two similar statements or words, that comparison is analogy. Next is equivalence. As simple as the word itself, the fact or state of being equal is called equivalence. On the contrary, the word contradiction means lack of agreement between two things. When two things are not similar at all, or two statements are so different that if one is true, the other ought to be not true or false, then those two statements shall be called to be in contradiction of each other. Last but not the least, force of argument. It is the determination as to how strong or weak an argument is and how well does the argument or the premises presented in the argument support the conclusion presented therein. So, if in an argument the premises or evidences suggested, the reasons stated well justify the conclusion drawn by the author, then that argument shall be considered to be a forceful argument. Let us now move on to critical reasoning techniques. We use reasoning techniques to reach a conclusion as well as to determine how we believe that conclusion to be true. That is, we want to find out a conclusion as well as find out a reason as to why do we believe it to be true. And in this whole process, we are going to require certain thinking techniques, and those methods of deriving a conclusion are called reasoning techniques. There are three major such techniques: the deductive one, inductive, and the abductive reasoning technique. Deductive reasoning is the process of using general ideas to get to a specific conclusion. It is often referred to as a top-down reasoning represented by a funnel. So, as in a funnel, a liquid is poured from the broader end, and the fine liquid is drawn from the narrower end. Similarly, we use general ideas and then use our deductive logic to find out the specific conclusions. The most basic form of deductive reasoning is syllogism, where the premises are various ideas that support the conclusion. It may be thought of in this form: if A is equal to B and A is also equal to C, then B must be equal to C. Here we see that a premises will have one major and one minor statement. The major premise will be a general statement or the general ideas that we are talking about, and the minor statement is the specific idea which is true in one specific case. On the basis of these two, we determine what is true in case of another specific case. Let us look on to certain examples. One of our customers is unhappy with his experience. So this is a general premise. The customer is unhappy with his experience. Then, why in this particular case is he unhappy? That's given in the minor premise. That is, he does not like how long it takes for a return phone call. So we reach to a conclusion that if we provide a quicker response, he will be more satisfied. Next example is, I must have 40 credits to graduate in spring. So a general premise says 40 credits are required for graduation. And then the next premise is, I only have 38 credits. So the conclusion being, I will not be graduating this spring. Coming down to the next one, the Career Counseling Center at my college is offering free resume reviews to students, which is a general premise. Next, I am a student and I plan on having my resume reviewed. So this is a specific fact or a minor premise leading on to a conclusion that I will not have to pay anything for this service. Next, all musical instruments make sounds. And then airplanes make sounds. So here the deduction leads to a conclusion that airplanes are musical instruments. Note that in this particular instance, the deductive reasoning did not lead to a practically true conclusion. So, we can also consider the fact that the deductive reasoning is not applicable in all scenarios. Similarly, we have another example. That is, all art is an imitation of nature, and music is an art. Thus, music is an imitation of nature, which is not necessarily a right statement. So, only in those circumstances where deductive reasoning works towards a practical solution do we apply them. And in those circumstances, what are the steps that we follow? Let us look on to them. First one being initial assumption, that we have talked about, the general principle given in the form of a premise. And then second premise, which is nothing but a minor fact about the present scenario. And then we test this scenario in the other situation if it proves to be true in another circumstance or not. And then we reach towards a conclusion that yes, if the first and the second hold to be true, then this conclusion is true in this different scenario as well. Moving on to inductive reasoning. It is exactly opposite of deductive reasoning. It uses set of specific observations to reach overreaching or broad conclusions, which means we'll use specific facts to formulate general principles or broad ideas that are likely to be true in more than one scenario. This is also called a bottoms-up method, using the same funnel diagram, or it can be represented using an inverted funnel or a pyramid, where the narrower part represents the premises and with the use of logic expands into a wider conclusion. Inductive reasoning is when certain facts are believed or assumed to be true and then we deduce a conclusion based on them. This technique is used in finding conclusions that are most likely true or they fit to the premise, which means that these conclusions are not necessarily true, but basing on the information that we have, they might hold true in various other circumstances. So this reasoning form is used in finding predictions, in making predictions and in forming generalizations. Let us look on to examples. All of the managers at my office have college degrees. So this is the fact that I know about my office. Then you must have a college degree to become a manager. This conclusion is a general conclusion applied to a wider range of situations, but this can be logically presumed on the basis of the given information that I have. Similarly, in another case, if my boss said someone would get a raise at the end of the year, and I know the fact that my sales were highest on the team, so I'll presume that the raise belongs to me. So the conclusion that I must be getting the raise, it is not necessarily true, but it can be a valid conclusion on the basis of the specific information that I have. Again, in another instance, I normally leave work after 6 p.m. and I am usually able to avoid traffic. So on the basis of these specific information sets, I can assume that as long as I leave work after 6, I will always miss traffic. Let us look at the another one. My boss is lenient and does not care when I am late. So if I am late to the office every day, even then, I will never be reprimanded for being late to the work. This is also a generalized conclusion based on certain assumptions that in no case the boss will avoid being lenient. Coming down to another type of reasoning, that is abductive reasoning. Here, abduction means a syllogism in which the major premise is evident but the minor premise is not. And therefore, the conclusion is only probable. So, we know that one fact is true, but we have no idea about the other fact which would lead to the conclusion, but we would still assume or guess that the conclusion that we are trying to reach is true. So, it's a probable conclusion. So, abduct means to take away or to extract. So, what are we extracting here? We are taking away a logical assumption. explanation, inference, conclusion, hypothesis, or the best guess from the observations or set of observations that we have in hand. The conclusion is merely a best guess here, and that may or may not be true. This can be better understood on the basis using certain illustrations. Let us see some familiar examples. If we see a spilled over milk with empty vessel lying in the kitchen, and we know the fact that cat sometimes sneaks into the kitchen, then we can reasonably conclude that the cat must have drank the milk. Here, the conclusion does not necessarily flow from the information we have, but we can very well make that guess, and that holds true in most of the scenarios. Similarly, if a mother finds a glass half filled of milk after the breakfast, let's say on the dining table, and she knows the fact that her daughter was getting late to school this morning, then she can very well presume that the daughter has left the milk unfinished in hurry. So what we are trying to do here is to guess the probable conclusion which holds true in most of the scenarios which are similar to this one. So abduction will lead you to the best explanation. Let us look on to some other examples. First one says that if you are stuck in traffic on an interstate road and you see an ambulance and police lights about half a mile ahead, and there is an exit available where you could take some back roads and then get back on the interstate road after the accident area, and then you use some other information, that is listening to the traffic report on the radio, and you look and see if the exit looks congested or not, and basing on this information and insights that you have and the observations that you have just received, you make a decision. Taking all the information at hand, you decide to stay on the interstate road and wait for the accident to get clear. Here what you're doing is making the decision which is best possible basing on all the observations that are available. In such a daily life scenario, it is not necessary to have all the information, but whatever information is available at hand, on the basis of that, it is necessary to make a right decision. So here, the process of abductive reasoning helps, where we can make a best guess that this might be the scenario, thus we should stay back or we should go on. Similarly, in a next scenario, if let's say a murder has taken place using a knife, and a person scared and shocked is sitting next to the deceased person having a knife in hand, that is holding on to the murder weapon, then it is an immediate assumption by the police officer that this person must have murdered somebody or the deceased person. Now, this is the best possible answer to the given scenario in lack of another fact coming to the picture. So, unless and until we know the whole scenario or we have eyewitnessed it, we can only presume things and make best possible guesses and try to find out different evidences on the basis of which we can form a conclusion. So, the process of making the first and the most probable guess is called abductive reasoning. Let us now look on to certain passage type questions where we can utilize all of these reasoning skills. So this is a sort of passage which might be present in the CLAT paper, and there will be several different form of questions following the same. Let us read this. Indian legal system has its unique features. One such feature is public interest litigation, that is PIL. It is a type of petition filed before the courts for social welfare. The concept of PIL is intended towards improvement in administrative setup. It plays an important role in bringing the change in the society as per the requirements and needs of the times. It is therefore important for Indian citizens to have awareness with respect to its advantages, disadvantages, and usage. This way, individuals can fulfill their duty of contributing for the welfare of the society. In a landmark case of Upendra Bakshi versus Union of India, a letter highlighting the pathetic condition of young offenders was sent to Supreme Court judge, which was taken into consideration by the court as a PIL, and orders were made accordingly. In various other cases, misuse of PIL has come to the notice. Supreme Court has thus interfered in the matter and issued guidelines for all the subordinate courts to be followed while entertaining a PIL. So, what do we understand by this passage? This passage is an informative passage trying to give us an introduction of a public interest litigation, trying to tell us the advantages of said petition and how it is helping in the welfare of the society and to bring about the improvement and change that is required. The passage also gives us some extra points of information that the citizens must be aware. Next, in a landmark case, a letter was also considered to be PIL, and then certain misuse is also being noticed. So the Supreme Court is trying to curb the misuse by way of certain guidelines. So here we see that we do not have a conclusion in this passage. We only have various sets of premises. Let us look on to questions now. First question is, what can be concluded from the above passage? We see that the first question itself is asking for the conclusion of the passage that you have just read. So let us rewind. We have read all the good things about PIL in the passage, and it only tries to tell us that it's a good change in the legal system. We now have a different type of petition which can be used for the public welfare. Let us now look at the options available. First one says, with widening of the scope of PIL, its misuse has taken entry in the system. The simple procedure framed for the welfare is leading to corruption now and then. Now we see this is a negative point about PIL which might be true but is not necessarily the conclusion of the given passage. Next one says, the court not only provide relief to citizens but it is the governing body which formulate policy for PIL to be followed by the state. Now, this might also be a true set of information, but this is not the conclusion. Why? Because the passage is trying to tell us how advantageous a PIL is and why we should be aware of it and how we can use it. So, this is not the conclusion. Next one says, PIL plays major role in serving general public of India. Yes. It helps safeguard their fundamental rights and provides justice. More or less very true. Next, PIL has no doubt served to the maximum for the welfare of the society. Since its adaptation in India, it has contributed in molding the law in accordance with the changes and developments in the society. So this also holds very true in the light of given information in the passage. So now we have option C and D. From the given options, we need to choose the better one. Which one forms a better conclusion of the given passage? So, we see that in point number C, they say that PIL is serving the means to provide justice. And in point D, they are more or less trying to say that it has proved to be beneficial for the welfare of the society and is helping the changes and developments. So, the paragraph doesn't talk about the justice directly, more so when we know that justice providers are the courts and the judicial system as a whole and not necessarily one specific petition. And the paragraph is talking about this particular petition and how it is beneficial. So basing on this logic, we find that option D seems to be more logically the conclusion of the given passage, that this specific petition is serving for the welfare, and then it leads to required changes and developments, which is very much the conclusion of the given passage. So we'll choose option D, and yes, that's the correct answer. Let us move on to next question. Which of the following is true? Which of the following, if true, would most contribute to the explanation of the facts above? So here, this question is, we can recognize from the statement that it is requiring us to find out the reason or explanation of the facts given. That is, find the reasons behind the assertions given in a passage. So this is an assertion reasoning type of question. Let us look at the options available. PIL, after its development in recent years, have marked a significant departure of traditional judicial proceedings. Now, this clearly is not the reason why the PIL is beneficial, because traditional judicial proceedings are not being departed from, but are only being supplemented by way of this new type of petition. So this clearly is not the explanation of the facts given. Next says, it was not a suddenly emerged concept. It was an idea which was in making for a long time before it came into existence, resulting in vigorous growth in India. So this may hold true, but this is not necessarily the reason why PIL is beneficial. Next option says, it is not for the benefit of the individual. Instead, it benefits public at large, and mainly the ones from weaker sections of the society who cannot afford to move the court in order to protect their fundamental rights. Another benefit is that any person can file a PIL. And the next option is none of the above. So one basic trick is, when the option is none of the above, we will at first instance try to avoid choosing none of the above and try to find out if the remaining three of the options have one as a right option. So option number C seems to be very correct to us. It gives us reasons why PIL is beneficial, because it is not for individual benefit and it serves public at large. And how is it useful for weaker sections, which forms major part of our society? And then it gives us one more reason that any person can file a PIL on behalf of somebody else. Thus, it is a beneficial petition. This is a very good reason why PIL is proving to be beneficial for our society. Thus, we'll choose option C. Let us go to next question. Which of the following, if true, most weakens the argument? So now, from the following options, we have to find out a statement which is not in consonance with the facts given in the passage, and rather it does not only support it, but it does not only oppose it, but it also weakens it. And we have to find out the option which most weakens the argument, which means all the four might be weakening the arguments presented, or some of them might be strengthening and the rest must be weakening. So out of those options which oppose the arguments given and which weaken the argument given, which debate with the arguments presented, out of those ones we have to find out which is most contradictory to the given premises. First one is, the PIL should be genuine and bona fide, and each High Court should formulate rules for encouraging genuine PILs and discouraging frivolous PILs or the ones having malicious object. This sounds to be true and supplementing the given information that yes, PIL is beneficial, but there is some sort of misuse happening. So forming this sort of rules by High Court and so on shall help the use of petition being successful. So this is supplementary. So this is clearly not the answer. Next is, the court should, before entertaining a PIL, verify the credentials. This is again a similar sort of suggestion to help the growth of the petition as well as the service of the benefit through that petition. Next is, many frivolous cases have been filed in the name of PIL as it is an easy access to higher courts without investing heavy court fees. Now this seems to be contradictory. This weakens the argument by saying that less fees were suggested for the reason that people could afford it, but now using are taking an advantage out of it, which is an undue advantage, and using it to form frivolous cases which do not even cost them a lot. Let us look on to next option. The courts also need to ensure whether or not a PIL placed before it has a public interest involved. So this is again a similar sort of statement like option A and B, where the suggestion is given to the courts to ensure whether the PIL is filed for the public interest or not before it is entertained. So again, this is supplementary to the passage and not weakening the arguments given therein. So clearly we have option C as an answer. Next question is, on which of the following assumptions does the argument rely? So here it's an assumption reason type of question where you have to find out the assumptions which led to the premises given in the argument, or the assumptions that you made to derive the conclusion that we have derived in first answer while reading the passage. So the assumptions that we made while reading the passage, let us first rewind that. The assumption was that the PIL is beneficial, and another assumption was that certain efforts can be taken to curb the misuse of the PIL. So in general, there is no reason why we should do away with this type of petition. So this is our general presumption. Let us look at the options. The PIL should be genuine and bona fide, and each high court should formulate rules for encouraging genuine PILs. Yes, this can be one suggestion, and it can be an assumption while we say that yes, it's a beneficial. We assume that all the efforts shall be taken for it to serve the best it can. Next is, the court should, before entertaining, verify the credentials. Again, the same thing. This can also be an assumption. Point C says the courts also need to ensure whether or not a PIL placed before it has a public interest involved. Again, same sort of suggestion. Yes, all of these can be assumed while we say that a PIL is beneficial. So we have option D as all of the above. Again, a trick for solving that whenever we have an option saying all of the above, we should try to figure out if by any chance any of the given options do not escape the group, and if all of them can be the right assumptions, and thus we can choose option D saying all of the above are correct assumptions. So here also, though these are not the direct assumptions we were making while reading the passage, these can be very well assumed in order to conclude as we have concluded in the given passage. Thus we will choose option D. Next question is, which of the following arguments is most parallel in structure with the given passage? So here we have to find an argument which is similar to the given argument. So if we have read a passage and concluded something, we need to imagine a similar situation wherein same sort of arguments can be made to reach similar sort of conclusions. Let us read what are the options available. There is no set procedure for filing of a PIL, but it can be filed in a way similar to that of writs. No, this is not an argument on similar lines, because we nowhere talk about the procedure in the given passage, plus it only talks about the benefits of a PIL and not the technicalities of it. Next, option B, a PIL can also be in the form of a letter. Now this is an extended fact which is true, or a telegram to Chief Justice directly or through a PIL lawyer. It should be filed under Article 226 to the High Court. and if it is to be filed before the Supreme Court, it should be filed under Article 32 of the Constitution. So again, this is talking about technicalities. Under what article should you file a PIL? What can be the form in which it is filed, and who should file it? This also talks about the technicalities and not in general the benefit, advantages and disadvantages or something. This is also not introductory. This is rather detail under the given head. So let us look at other options available. The concept of PIL was introduced as an instrument of safeguarding interests and rights of general public. Yes, this was very much the conclusion, and this argument seems to be similar to the one given in the passage. Therefore, in any case of violation of fundamental rights or other legal rights of public at large, a PIL can be presented to the High Court or the Supreme Court. Now, this is a general statement, as we have seen in the given passage as well. So, this seems to be the answer. Let us verify the last one as well, which says, there are numerous cases in courts filed for the welfare of the public. Now, we see that option A and B were narrower in scope as compared to the given passage. They were into the technicalities. And option D is wider in scope as compared to the given passage. This not just talks about PIL, this rather talks about all sorts of petitions which may be filed for the welfare of the public. It is only option C which seems to be similar and in line with the passage that we have just read. Hence, option C should be our right answer. We can deal with further such questions in coming up videos. And mostly, as we know that CLAT 2020 forms only passage type questions, we should also practice a lot of other questions that might be asked in similar passages. So till the next video comes, stay safe, stay home. Thank you.